Hey, welcome back again to another edition of Lost World War II Gold, and this is episode 5. And this episode, they were looking at Story Rock, which they were told by the code expert it's behind a waterfall. And they drained the waterfall, and nothing. They thought there was a tunnel back there. They thought there was rocks that were collapsed and pushed against an entrance. No. But they were still wondering why the magnetometer said there was, had a big reading, and that reading can go up to 18 feet. Well, like I said, I've been in the desert with a metal detector, and it's going off the chart from the iron that's in the, they start to look, and they cannot find anything. They cannot find the cave. They cannot find rocks. And so they go back to the code guy and show him a picture of the circle with the stuff in it. It looked like a crown to me. Seriously, it looked like a circle with a crown. And one thing about Philippine history is it once was under British rule. And it was under Spanish rule, then it was under American rule. And he has years and years of experience on, but one thing I would ask him was, of all the information that you received, all the codes that you've done, all the markers that you found and realized what they meant, how much gold have you found? How many treasure maps have you found? How many treasures have you found? Because it says a lot, because you can sit there and say, oh, this means this means that, and then next thing you know, you've never really found anything, but you found a circle. The circle means gold, but you searched all over, nothing. Maybe that circle doesn't mean gold. Maybe it means something else. So they go to Grandpa, and they show him, and he's like, what's this? They're like, well, we're here to find out, is this a rock? Well, we want to know what you think. Oh, go to the turtle. So he directs them to the turtle. And they're like, oh, it's a turtle. It's not a crown, it's not the sun, it's not a marker, it's a turtle. Oh, what were we thinking? Grandpa found it. Oh. So they go to this, they start searching, they're cutting through the grass, and oh, there's the turtle right there. So the guy who does the mark says, oh, depends on the legs, the tail, the head, that's where the gold's located. Oh my God. Oh. So they say, we owe Grandpa a lot. Well, Grandpa hasn't showed you nothing yet. All Grandpa has is told you a story. And I can tell you a story. I mean, seriously, is that. So, one thing you didn't notice, I mean, you may have noticed, is they took a drone and they flew it straight up. Right over the turtle stone. And then you notice there were paths that were been heavily treaded on. People have walked here. So they knew where that turtle stone was. They probably had somebody show them, and they were just chopping around the grass, trying to find out, trying to clear up to make it look good and everything. So they go back to the pyramid, and they're trying to find out if it's what it is, see if it's a landmark or whatever. I'm really interested in the pyramid because I'd like to find out why it's symmetrical. And they're like, well, you know, if it's pointing that way, the gold's that way, and if it's pointing that way, the gold's that. Well, obviously it's pointing in 4 directions. One's upwards to the sky and 3 out the other way. And it's a natural rock that I know of. And so they think the pyramid leads something. I mean, seriously. They bring Martin and Mark over to the turtle rock, and they're like, the gold is right here. That's what it means. It's right here. It's underneath it. It has no heads, no legs. I mean, it has a head, no legs, no tail, so it's pointing towards the goal with the head. The head's not pointed up, so it's pointed straight down. So the gold's somewhere in this area right here. I'm laughing because no one's found gold in 40-something years. So how do they know the gold is right there? I mean, seriously. So John thinks they're on the right track. John thinks they're on the right track for everything. And so, while they're looking through the turtle stone, they find a snare and they find a bullet casing. Now, the bullet casing they thought was Japanese. Then they thought it was American. I actually thought it was an M16, but then I'm thinking, wait, M16s didn't come out until the 70s. M14s was before that, so it was an earlier rifle than that. And so they send it to Bingo, who takes it to a ballistics expert, and he decides it's a American bullet 30-40. It's a 30-40 bullet, American, produced in 1908, or was it 1902? Well, it doesn't matter, because, and they were like, oh, how did it get there? How did it get there? Well, if you know Philippine history, you know American history, you know one thing. In the Spanish-American War, the Philippines was ceded to the United States. In 1898, there was a Philippine resurrection, pretty much a revolution against America to become a separate nation. And so American soldiers were sent to the Philippines to fight the insurgents. So when they left, a lot of the guns would have been there. They were like, well, maybe the Japanese stocked up on the ones that were left over. This is pre-World War I. This is like 10 years before World War One, and two, the Japanese were on our side in World War I. So after the Philippine resurrections, farmers could have had the gun, former military guys could have had guns, these rifles, and so these rifles were probably common used in the early 1900s. During World War II, they were probably confiscated by the Japanese in order to stop any resurrection. But there was a Philippine underground who fought against the Japanese, and Ferdinand Marcos claimed to be one of the guerrillas fighting against the Japanese, but there has been no evidence ever. There was a Filipina lady who fought diligently against the Japanese, and Marcos took on her persona and her story and made it his story in order to make it sound like he was a military hero to the Philippines. He never was. He was a car salesman, failed at that. He was a judge, and that was about all Marcos ever was. If he was a judge, he may have been. There's a story about him with basically how they got connected and power of attorney, and how he stole all the money from the Black Eagle Trust Fund and started to embezzle money from the Philippine government and steal gold from the National Treasury. There was one year when Henry Rojas sued Marcos in Hawaii, they did a financial background investigation on Marcos, and they found out that several years during Marcos' administration, there was zero gold that was produced in the Philippines and put into the national bank. So Marcos was stealing all the gold from the country. There was $300 million that was transferred to Switzerland, just gold alone. And the Swiss government wouldn't give it back to the Philippines unless they said that Imelda Marcos was guilty of graft and corruption. And, of course, a crony judge let her off, and the Swiss government kept the gold, to my knowledge. They may have given it back later on. I'm not positive on that one. But I do know that the Swiss government did give back to the Philippines like $800 million in cash, because there was a $300 million bank account from Marcos in Switzerland, and after he was deposed, it was put on hold and eventually returned to the Philippines. Now, Imelda has said several things. First, she said the Golden Buddha story was a joke, and there was nothing. That was nothing. That was not a true story. Then she said that Marcos made his money through gold, just gold only. And she said that he made the money on gold, but he was stealing gold. He had over $300 million in bearer bonds on gold, and this is in the 80s. So that was about $800, $500 an ounce. I can't remember what it was. I think it was $800 an ounce in the 80s. So it would be worth about $600, $700 million now. But if he got it when it was even cheaper, he'd talk about that would be like $10 billion right there. So they stole over $10 billion. And Imelda actually had several bank accounts under the name Jane Ryan, where she had over, I think, $2 or $3 billion. One of the daughters of Marcos It's not Amy, but it's one of the other daughter, went to Germany and transferred $1.2 billion out of an account to another account, which somehow disappeared, and nobody was able to find out where that money went to. She denied going to the bank, but the bank showed her on film. They showed the bank account. They showed the bank account number where it went to, and then the money disappeared. And then she went to the Philippines and it said, never happened. Never happened. 1.2 billion. No shame. So John is trying to find a void, and he found a void in the ground, but then lost the void. And he's like, well, that's proof there's a tunnel under there. And it caved in, and oh, come on. It's like they're not even looking. They're not even researching. Why would the Japanese build a tunnel in 1941 when they had the whole South Pacific to themselves, when they could have just shipped stuff up unabated? Doesn't make sense. And so then there was like, well, there's a back door. Maybe that's what it is. You know, they brought everything into the main cave. They put everything and they blew it up. But they have a small back door. They just put some rocks on. They can easily go in and out. You guys got a really overactive imagination. Never happened. Oh, man. Jeez. And they said that's the back door symbol right there. Yeah, that's it. So we'll see what happens next week on this. I hope they find it. I mean, prove me wrong. But it proved everybody wrong, because nobody's found anything in over 48 years now. So just saying. All right. See you next time.